The knock came at 11:47. I know because I'd been lying awake watching the clock, the way you do when you're far from home and sleep won't come. 3 sharp raps on the door next to mine, then a voice cold, impatient, cutting through the thin walls of that Nebraska hotel. "Mr. Hartley, you need to open this door." I sat up. The second-floor hallway of the Plainview Hotel was never quiet, but this was different. This had an edge to it, a kind of violence, waiting just beneath the surface. It was October of 1956. I'd been traveling through the Midwest on a publicity tour, hitting small towns where the local papers still mattered and people lined up to shake your hand outside the movie theater. The studio had booked me solid 2 cities a day, sometimes 3. Breakfast with the Rotary Club, lunch with the newspaper editor, dinner with the Chamber of Commerce. By the time I reached Plainview, I was running on coffee and obligation. All I wanted was a decent night's sleep before the morning press event. "Mr. Hartley," the voice again, louder now. "I'm giving you 1 minute." I got out of bed and went to the door. Through the peephole I could see a section of hallway, a man in a dark suit standing too close to the neighboring door. The hotel manager, I assumed. I'd seen him downstairs when I checked in. Slick hair, thin mouth, the kind of man who smiles with his teeth but not his eyes. He'd recognized me immediately, made a show of upgrading my room, told me twice how honored the hotel was to have me as a guest. I heard the door next to mine open, just a crack. "I told you yesterday," came a second voice, older, unsteady but dignified. "I'm waiting for a check. It should be here tomorrow." "Should be doesn't pay for 5 nights, Mr. Hartley. I should have stayed in my room. That would have been the sensible thing. I had an early morning ahead of me, a full day of smiling and shaking hands and saying the right things to the right people." But there was something in that old man's voice, not pleading, not quite, but something close to it. Something that reminded me of my own father during the Depression, trying to hold on to his dignity while the world crumbled around him. I opened my door. The manager turned, and his face changed the instant he recognized me. The hardness softened into something worse, calculation. "Mr. Peck," he said, smoothing his tie. "I apologize for the disturbance. We're just handling a small matter. Nothing to concern yourself with." The old man stood in his doorway, fully dressed despite the hour. He must have been 70, maybe more. His shirt was clean but worn, his collar frayed at the edges. His suit jacket hung on him in a way that suggested he'd lost weight recently, but he stood straight, shoulders back. He had the bearing of someone who'd spent a lifetime standing at attention. "What kind of matter?" I asked. The manager's smile tightened. You could see the irritation flash across his face before he controlled it. "Nothing to concern yourself with, sir. Mr. Hartley here has an overdue account. We're simply asking him to settle it or vacate the premises." "At midnight?" "Hotel policy, Mr. Peck. We have to maintain standards." I looked at the old man. He met my eyes for a moment, then looked away. There was shame there, deep and raw, and that made me angry, in a way I hadn't expected. "How much does he owe?" The manager hesitated. You could see him weighing it, whether to tell me, whether to push back, whether this was worth the risk of annoying a famous guest. $42, he said finally. I went back into my room, got my wallet from the nightstand, and returned with 2 20s and a 10. He didn't take the money immediately. "Mr. Peck, that's very generous of you, but the matter is more complicated than a simple payment. We have policies about—" "Take it." The firmness in my voice surprised even me, but I'd seen enough of men like this during the war years, during the Depression. Men who used rules and policies like weapons against people who had nowhere else to turn. He took it. The old man's face had gone white. "I can't accept this," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "I appreciate the gesture, truly, but I can't." "You're not accepting anything," I told him. "I'm paying for a room. What happens in it is your business." The manager pocketed the bills, muttered something about management's discretion, and walked away down the corridor. His footsteps echoed on the worn carpet, fading into the stairwell at the end of the hall. That should have been the end of it. I should have nodded good night to the old man, gone back to my room, closed the door, and tried to salvage what was left of the night's sleep. I should have let him thank me and moved on. Instead, I asked, "You mind if I come in for a minute?" He stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. For a moment I thought he might refuse, might tell me he was fine and close the door. Then he stepped back and held it open. The room was identical to mine, same faded carpet with its pattern of roses, same heavy curtains blocking out the streetlights, same picture of wheat fields on the wall above the bed, but it felt different, emptier somehow. There was a single suitcase on the dresser, worn leather with brass clasps, a hat on the bed, a folded newspaper on the nightstand. Nothing else. No clutter, no comfort. Just the bare minimum of a life in transit. "My name's Thomas Hartley," he said, closing the door behind us. "Captain Thomas Hartley, retired. Gregory Peck." "I know who you are, Mr. Peck." He sat down slowly in the room's only chair, like his bones hurt. "I saw you in The Yearling when it came out. Saw you in Gentleman's Agreement. That one made me think." He paused. "And 12 O'Clock High. That one especially." His voice softened. "I was a pilot. European theater. 8th Air Force." I sat on the edge of the bed. "You flew B-17 seconds?" "B. 24 seconds. Liberators. 28 missions out of East Anglia." He said it matter-of-factly, the way you might say you used to work in a bank or drive a delivery truck. "Made it home. Lost a lot of good men who didn't. Lost my co-pilot over Schweinfurt. Lost my bombardier over Berlin. Made it back myself without a scratch. Never understood that." We sat there in silence for a moment. Outside, I could hear a truck passing on the street below, its engine grinding through the gears. They carried things the rest of us couldn't see, couldn't understand, even if we wanted to. "The check I mentioned," he said finally. "It's real. My pension. Government sends it the first of every month, regular as clockwork. Should have been here 3 days ago, but the bank made an error with the routing. They're sorting it out." He looked down at his hands, at the age spots and the prominent veins. "I've got a daughter in California, Los Angeles. Haven't seen her in 2 years. She's married now. Got a little boy I've never met. His name is Michael." His voice caught slightly on that. "She doesn't know I'm—" He stopped, searched for the right words. "She doesn't know things are tight." "Ugh, you were going to see her?" "Soon as I got the check. Bus tickets already bought. Leaves tomorrow afternoon. I was going to surprise them. Show up at their door with presents for the boy. Be a grandfather, you know, just for a week or so." I wanted to ask why he hadn't called her, why he hadn't told her he was struggling, why he hadn't asked for help, but I knew the answer. Pride. The same pride that kept my father standing in the unemployment line during the Depression without ever telling his own brothers. The kind of pride that keeps a man upright when everything else tells him to fall. "The manager," I said. I showed him the letter from the bank, showed him everything. Thomas's jaw tightened, the muscles working beneath the loose skin. Didn't matter. Said he couldn't operate on promises. Said he'd heard every excuse in the book. Maybe he's right. Maybe I shouldn't have stayed here without the money in hand. But I didn't have anywhere else to go, and I thought. He shook his head slowly. I thought I'd earned a little faith. That's the moment that stays with me, even now. Not the money, not the confrontation in the hallway, not even what happened the next morning. That one sentence, I thought I'd earned a little faith. We talked for another 20 minutes. He told me about his daughter, about the missions he flew, about coming home and trying to find his place in a world that had moved on without him. He'd worked as an accountant for 15 years after the war, saved carefully, lived modestly. Then his wife got sick, cancer. The treatments ate through their savings in 18 months. She died anyway. She was a good woman, he said quietly. Wrote me every single day when I was overseas. I kept every letter. They're in that suitcase there. When I finally left his room, I told him to get some rest. Told him the bus to California would be there before he knew it. Told him his grandson was going to be lucky to meet him. He thanked me 3 times, and each time, it felt like he was apologizing for something that wasn't his fault. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed listening to the sounds of the hotel pipes clanking, a radio playing somewhere below, a couple arguing 3 doors down. I kept thinking about Thomas Hartley in that empty room, about the indignity of what had happened. A man who'd risked his life for his country, who'd watched his friends die over Germany, reduced to begging for one more night in a third-rate Nebraska hotel. The next morning, I canceled the press event. The studio representative arrived at my room at 7:30, already dressed, tie already crooked, face already red. His name was Mitchell, a nervous man in his 30s who'd been assigned to manage my tour. He said when I told him, "You can't just cancel. We have 40 people waiting downstairs. The mayor's coming. The radio station is set up. We promised them. I'm doing it. Greg, this is unprofessional. This is..." He stopped, took a breath, tried a different approach. "This is going to cause problems. Big problems. The studio's going to hear about this. I need to be somewhere else." "Where? Where could you possibly need to be?" I didn't answer that. I just told him to make my apologies, to blame it on food poisoning or exhaustion or whatever story would work. He left angry, and I didn't blame him. I went to the bank with Thomas Hartley at 9 o'clock. We sat in hard wooden chairs while a young clerk shuffled through paperwork and made phone calls and consulted with his supervisor. The bank manager came out eventually, a round man with glasses who kept glancing at me nervously, probably wondering if I was about to cause a scene or if my presence there meant something he should be worried about. I wasn't going to cause a scene. I just sat there, next to Thomas, a silent witness. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes just being there, just refusing to leave, just making people look at what they're doing sometimes, that's all it takes. The check arrived by special courier at 10:15. Thomas held it like it might disappear if he looked away, his hands trembling slightly as he endorsed it and pushed it across the counter. I drove him to the bus station in my rental car. He didn't want me to, said I'd done more than enough, said I had better things to do with my time, but I insisted. We didn't talk much on the way. He sat in the passenger seat looking out at the flat Nebraska landscape, at the fields of harvested corn stretching to the horizon. When we got to the station, I walked him to his gate. The bus was already there, idling, exhaust rising in the cool morning air. A few other passengers were boarding, carrying suitcases and paper bags. "I'll pay you back," he said, turning to face me. "I'll send you the money. Where should I?" "No, you won't. Mr. Peck, Captain Hartley," I said, and I made sure he was looking at me when I said it. "You don't owe me anything. You paid your debts a long time ago. You paid them over Germany. You pay them every day you keep standing. Use that money to buy presents for your grandson. Use it to take your daughter to dinner. Use it for anything except paying me back." He shook my hand, firm grip, steady despite everything, and got on the bus. I stood there on the platform until it pulled away, watching through the dusty windows as Plainview got smaller and smaller behind him. The studio sent 3 telegrams that week. The tone got sharper with each one. I'd embarrassed them, they said. I'd damaged important relationships. The mayor had been upset. The local press had asked difficult questions. Didn't I understand the importance of maintaining professional commitments? Didn't I realize how hard they worked to arrange these tours? I sent one telegram back. Understood. I never told anyone about Thomas Hartley. Not the studio executives who dressed me down over the phone. Not the reporters who asked where I'd disappeared to that morning. Not even my wife when I finally got home and she asked how the tour had gone. Some things don't need to be explained. Some things don't need an audience, or applause, or understanding. You learn over time that integrity isn't free. It costs you sleep and relationships and sometimes your reputation. People call you difficult. They say you're making trouble where there doesn't need to be any. They tell you to stay in your lane, to smile and wave, to let things work themselves out the way they always do. But I've never believed things work themselves out. Things work out when someone decides they're worth working out. When someone decides that a man's dignity matters more than a publicity schedule. When someone decides that faith, earned or not, is something we owe each other, especially to those who've already given everything they had to give. The knock came at 11:47 that night in Nebraska. and I could have pretended I didn't hear it. I could have rolled over and gone back to sleep and caught my flight the next morning and never thought about the old man in the next room again. I'm grateful I didn't. I'm grateful I opened that door.